You might. There's some places where that, or hey, marriage is between a man and a woman. That's hate speech, right? Okay, so it is extremely difficult for the world to accept the teaching of Christ, and so you're taking this word out in your baptismal. You don't talk earlier about baptism, but your baptismal promise. What did Jesus say? One of the baptismal lines is Jesus, as we bless the water and all, is Jesus commanded his apostles, make disciples of the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. How do we do that in our everyday life? So that's also a call. Now, in the office, I'll wind up with people who are used to seeing me in office attire, and they'll call and say, wait a minute, did I see you at an intro to marriage prep or something? What are you doing with that collar on? It freaks them out. And then there's people who are at the office who come here to Mass, and they're like, whoa, what are you doing up there? So these two worlds are colliding, and it's really cool. But they teach us that the diaconate is also a bit of a bridge. Because I know Monsignor was in here and there's a very easy relationship with him. We have a great relationship with our priests, but we also are out in everyday life. You know what? I can't go to Publix without spending. I think yesterday there was somebody who had a very serious illness in the family. I think it was about a 20-minute conversation. And I got stuff melting in the car, right? What do? We have to be present to each other. So that's a prime example of how the diaconate and the married life really overlap each other. And there's that call, because once you're married, once you're ordained, those sacraments are the service sacraments of the Catholic Church. Right? We know the 7 sacraments. Have you done that one yet? You sleeping?
No.
Have you already talked about the 7 sacraments?
Well, your sacrament 3 and 4 and 5 today. So we have 2 more.
What I'm saying, I got you. So really the service sacraments of holy orders and marriage are a similar sacrament in that they're both for service. So again, marriage is a service sacrament to your spouse, holy orders is a service sacrament to your congregation. So that really gives you a couple of different approaches to it. So now how do you take these two things drawing you in 2 different directions and bring them together? And that's where our spouses have a lot to do with making our ministry work in the church. Because I couldn't be here if my wife said, hey, I need you to go do this today. It's like, or else I may spend the morning doing something, and then the afternoon it's like here's your shopping list. It's 2 different worlds. It's very, very cool. The priests, they don't have to deal with that, right? They get home, it's good to be, to only do what you want to do. And it's your call to do what each other want to do. It's not just one-way street. So that's marriage and holy orders so far. What else would you like me to talk about? Nothing. Okay.
What do you guys want to know about marriage and holy orders?
Put y'all on the spot. You don't have to.
How'd your calling come about?
It's interesting. It was at first I thought it was a call to the priesthood in my 10, 12 years old, something like that. But it wasn't. It was like there's something calling me, but I don't know what it is. And little did I know that it was to the diaconate. Because the diaconate was suppressed, the permanent diaconate was suppressed until after Vatican II. Everybody here recognizes what Vatican II is? Yes, okay. And after Vatican II, Vatican II was a result of a lot of priests in Dachau who said that, there's got to be another way for us to work with people to spread the word. And there were so many priests murdered in Dachau, which was a concentration camp in Germany during World War II. They put all the priests. There was a priest block. That this thinking began there. So the seeds of the permanent of bringing back the permanent diaconate were planted in concentration camps during World War II. And so after the end of the war, you saw this new thinking about bringing back the diaconate to help serve, because 2 things. One was many priests were murdered, and secondly, so there was that help standpoint. We're not like priests like, we don't have enough priests, so we're gonna have deacons. And the second was to have people who are among everyone to help spread the word of God. Because you had all these Christian countries lead themselves into 2 terrible world wars. What's with that? They shouldn't be doing that if they're truly Christian. So those were the seeds of the restoration of the diaconate. So you'll see a priest who's a transitional deacon. He'll come, he'll be here one summer or something, he'll do a bunch of baptisms and a few weddings or whatever we have, and start to practice for the priesthood in some ways. They go on, get ordained, and they may wind up here or get transferred somewhere else. But you're stuck with us. so we are part of the fabric of the community. Yes.
How do you balance your 3 worlds? So your secular work world, then also religious world and family world, and how do you relay those priorities to each one of those worlds so you don't get in trouble as a window?
I get in trouble. but you're right, that's a great question. In fact, during work, I have my regular work email, because I work regular 7:30 to 6 job down the street. And so I have my regular work email, and I can also tap into my email here. And sometimes I get the weirdest phone calls, and I try to use certain times of day to be available. I always tell people, if you're gonna contact me from church, either text me or email me and I'll get back to you, because it's hard to take those calls. Every now and again, I just have to make time during the day to just call some people back, just simply because there's a more of an immediate need. So that's where you're just kind of shifting gears. You have to kind of compartmentalize. You have to live your faith the whole way, but you have to compartmentalize as far as what's going on. From a marriage standpoint, I promised my wife that I'll only be here 2 nights a week, plus the weekends. And so Tuesday nights and Thursday nights I'm not here. So Monday nights and Wednesday nights are my nights to meet with couples who are preparing for marriage, meet with people who want to talk about different elements of their faith. It's amazing what types of questions people may have that they just need someone on one time. And so I'll generally be here those 2 nights. And I had a couple recently, that I was preparing for marriage, and they're like, we just can't meet you, Monday or Wednesday night. I said, well, I got Saturday morning at 8:30, otherwise then we got baptisms or masses or something else going on. We don't want to get up that early. Okay, no problem. I'll give you to somebody else. Maybe you can work something out. But yeah, it's a constant give and take. And every now and again when my wife sees that 3rd night on the calendar, and that's the advantage, I use a Google Calendar that she can see also. I do hear about it. It's like, wait a minute, what's this with the 3rd night? And then on top of it, you have business dinners, and people from out of town or travel, whatever. So there's all of that going on too. So you're right, it is a constant balancing act. It seems to be working. I haven't gotten killed yet. Yes.
When you're ordained a deacon, do you receive the sacrament of holy orders?
Yes.
Like you would, even though you're not a priest?
Yes.
It's the same thing?
Holy orders.
Okay.
It is. And so we share in the holy orders with the priest. Now our faculties are different. So when the Archbishop provides us our faculties, it will not include consecrating the Eucharist or absolving sin. Now, under emergency situations, any confirmed Catholic can, if somebody's ready to die, they can say, I absolve you under my ministry of priest, prophet, king, that you receive in baptism. That's a different story. But yeah, as far as us in the ordinary course of the day, we have everything covered.
I do, that's great.
Yes.
I grew up in the Diocese of Savannah back in the 70s, and
We're burying one of your priests, the 24th.
okay. Well, there was never a shortage of Irish priests when I was growing up. Yeah, and Holy Orders was never really presented to me until I was late teens, 17, 18, and it was mostly from my family. Has that changed in the church as far as presenting that to children younger?
What do you mean, that it's an option?
That is an option.
I think, I don't know about the church so much as I think families. I can tell you, my dad did not want his only son to be a priest. And so, that was discouraged when I was younger. But again, the call was not to that. I don't think families talk about it anymore. And you see much smaller families where it used to be maybe the third or fourth child might consider a vocation, where now there's no third or fourth child. So, I don't know when we talk about it in PSR. Do you have any idea?
I think, well, in PSR, Monsignor or the other priests walk around to the classrooms, make sure the kids know who they are. I think it's more a ministry of presence. They also talk about the sacraments just as we do, obviously at their level. And so they get an introduction to the priesthood and religious life. But I'm along with Peter in age, and we heard about vocations very seriously in school and in mass, and we don't hear that
We
today.
don't hear
So I'm a volunteer for the teens, and today there is a lot more of that, simply because we want to be spreading that, but it's not that there is the general like vocations presence to the mass of the teens, but what there also is now is when you can identify that teens are diving deeper in their faith, there's additional programs that then, on other nights where they can dive deeper, and typically with that, there is the direction of, hey, if you think a teen is, actually really considering, then make that as a have you considered, and then start actually making that direct connection. It's not necessarily like driven from the mountaintops for everyone, but it's for those that show the appetite for it. But I think it's more well known, at least within this parish.
Yeah, we don't hear it like we used to, you're right. And, like you say, I walk down, I love to go stop in the rooms and, to see what's going on. Or here you'll see Monsignor out there during the weekday welcoming children to class, to school, which is a great presence. Yes?
Could you speak a little bit to your liturgical participation? I know I've seen you guys read the gospel, and there are other things, and I guess with that, could you also speak to, I know there are, in communities where there are fewer priests, I know that's not, I think you mentioned that was not the most salient feature of the diaconate, but it seems in practical terms would be something that's increasingly important.
Sure.
Could you speak to that too?
Well, two things. One is, remember, the permanent diaconate has just been reinstituted for like 50 years. So we're still developing. In a couple hundred years, they'll look back and say, here's what they should do, here's what they shouldn't do. The first classes that were ordained in the late 60s, early 70s, I think Deacon Whitney would tell you, hey, they had like a few years of, some sort of preparation, which was loosely based on formation of the priesthood, and they just kind of threw them out there. I know some older deacons who said the first time they ever served at altar was right the day after they got ordained, and they were scared to death. It's scary enough the way it is. I mean, everybody's staring at you. But liturgically, our job is to we prepare table, we proclaim the word, and we clean up. And the deacon stole is kind of like this. You know what that is? That's a dish towel. We have ritualized dish towel. That's what it is. And so during the Mass, that's what you see. In fact, our main job, even though we serve at Mass, our main job is ministry of service to the community. And that's the main call of the diaconate. Yes?
So I'm exploring Catholicism, and I went and met with Father Mark, because I'm very involved in a church, and I loved his suggestion to me, because what kind of brought me here was my husband, and we're expecting a child, and we want to have our child baptized. And so I came to Father Mark, and he said, I don't want you to quit doing anything, I just want you to stay curious. And he gave me this book called The Great News About Sex and Marriage, which is, it talks about Christ's relationship to the church and how Christ lived his whole life to build up the church and to serve the church. And he talked about the reconciliation of, you know, what Adam and Eve did in the garden and how that was done through Mary and through Christ. And he talked about marriage as almost as if Christ and the church are one, you and your husband are one. And so I loved what you said earlier, is like, how do you kind of do that, right? Because if you don't have Christ at the center, like, what is your thing that you go to? What's bigger than you when things are tough? So it's kind of like you live your life, or you love and reverence for what Christ did for you. That's who you turn to, as opposed to like secular worldly things. But it was really great because it kind of talked about all the different sacraments, because the sacrament of marriage is so extremely relevant to all the other stuff. And I think that unless you're really kind of taught that growing up, you kind of miss that.
Right. Yeah, we don't talk enough about it. Yeah, that's a good book. In fact, we used that in formation many years ago, and I used to hand out to all the couples I prepared in the older edition, basically to explain the why. Because, you know, if we can understand the why behind our faith, and we don't always understand because there's certain mysteries, we can live our faith better. But if it's just a bunch of rules, it's hard to do that. I mean, I think part of what we're running into in this day and age is that people saw their faith as rules and decided to make their own. Go ahead.
What would you consider to be the most important piece of advice that you give couples that are going into marriage?
There's no single best piece.
I know, but like, because you can take it for so many different
My
directions.
favorite phrase is a good marriage is the union of two good forgivers.
Is it taught amongst the sacraments of marriage and holy orders that a believer must choose one?
Well, generally,
Let's choose one, sorry.
Must choose one, like you must be one.
in the Western Church, generally is only one. It's very unusual. We have in our Diocese of Atlanta a little over, right around 200 permanent deacons. Our demographics is terrible. About 70% are over 80. So we have, we looked once to buy health insurance as a group. That did not work. But yeah, generally it is one. You receive one sacrament.
I mean versus neither. So.
What, the single state, is that?
Yeah.
The single-
Yeah, it's either, yeah. Yes, sir.
So, like, say a married man did feel the call to the priesthood,
Yep.
but he's not, but he's out in Western country, could he be ordained in the Eastern Rite, or would he have to?
I'm not as familiar with the Eastern rites. We do have an active Malachite community here, and I know at least one deacon who is ordained in the Western Rite. He does have faculties in the Eastern Rite, but it is a completely different. Well, although it overlaps, their formation process does take a bit longer. It's a bit more intense, even though there's fewer things that a permanent deacon can do in that. Now, there used to be minor orders, what they used to call minor orders. In fact, some of the old church, I was up in Mundelein, and at the altar, the old altar, which faced, or at Oriental, faced east, they had on the floor in the tile, it specifically said which level of minor orders could stand where. So you had lector, or you had acolyte, or deacon, and they were all in different places. Very clerical, very, very much, 1, 2, 3 bishop, priest, and so on. And then, and you hear the Pope talking about that a little bit, and about clericalism, and the downside of clericalism, which is really an arrogance in the clergy, who rely on that for their authority, as their own authority. We should be your servants, and not the other way around.
I have a question. Can you talk about an annulment and what that is and why you would have to have an annulment if you're coming in and you have with your ex or your husband had been married before or your wife had been married before?
Well, let's back up a minute.
Just a question, I just want to understand.
I'll make it really,
Yeah.
are you in a new marriage?
Oh, no, this is not,
Okay.
you can explain that to us.
Sure. Civil divorce does not nullify a sacrament. In the Catholic Church, we believe all marriages are valid unless proven otherwise. Now, you can marry somebody your parents don't like, right? And they can't say, hey, is that valid? No, it's you and your spouse who have to see if it's otherwise. Now, if you are in a marriage that results in divorce, you're still married. Civil divorce is great. I mean, and that's part of I think the confusion we have is that when we celebrate marriage, I'm signing the marriage license for the civil marriage, and at the same time I'm celebrating the sacramental marriage. In some countries, you go down to the justice of the peace or to the courthouse, you get civilly married, you come to the church, and we do the sacrament. I think that helps to show the difference. So now a couple's divorced, and they never decide, they don't ever remarry. They don't need it, okay? Because they may not be living together anymore, they're not free to date because they're still married, but they may decide, this is just it, I'm not going to get married again. So in the Catholic Church, what an annulment is doing is looking back at the time of marriage. Did the parties intend for a lifelong commitment? Did the parties intend to be open to life? Did the parties understand what marriage was in the Catholic Church? That's why we meet with people now. We go over these things and we talk about that, and we try to discuss, what are some of the things that, how are your differences going to be unified in your new domestic church? Because it's a lifelong commitment. And essentially what the church does is through the annulment process looking to say, okay, that sacrament that was not validly expressed. If at the time of marriage, one of the couples said, hey, I never want to have children and I'm going to do everything I can to not have children. Well, if you're not open to life, that marriage is not valid in the Catholic Church, so you can get, that's one of the things. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, because it's kind of a downer, it's a tough time for folks, but it's time for healing. But a person would need the annulment if they intended to begin dating again or wanted to enter into a marriage. And I don't mean just a civil marriage, but if they want to get married in Catholic Church as well. Because technically they're still married, right? We just do a sacrament, generally we do the sacraments of baptism, baptism only once, marriage only once, reconciliation, thank God, all the time. First communion, all the time. But the marriage sacrament, baptism, we only do one time. Yes?
Marriage question. You mentioned before that you witnessed the vows.
Yep.
And something I learned, and maybe you can explain it more, is in the Catholic Church, the only thing that requires a valid marriage is consent of two parties. It's not the priest that marries them, it's the priest that
Priest, deacon, or bishop witnesses. You know who the ordinary ministers of marriage are?
It's a couple.
The couple are the ordinary ministers of the sacrament of marriage. You are actually, when you express your vows, think of the beginning, right? In the beginning, God said, right? And things happen. God, and we're made in the image and likeness of God. So when we say our vows, something happens. What happens? You become married. And that, I think, is very cool, and also one thing that we just don't talk enough about until you come to my class in here before you decide to get married. Everybody else? Yes?
Can you speak on, you kind of touched on it, but, and the Word on Fire videos, if you didn't watch it, kind of touched on it as well, but I think people think in marriage that it has to be total, full, faithful, and fruitful, so in terms of having kids, it said in the video, people think that like a good Catholic couple kind of just like pops at kids, like no tomorrow, like 19 kids and counting, but there's like a big rise of people like don't want as many kids, like you said, like you only have one or two, like your only son, or they want no kids, or like maybe they can't have kids. So how does the church look at that, and does it take away from the sacrament of marriage, I guess?
Very good question on that. And you've asked multiple questions.
Yes.
If a couple decides to get married and ultimately finds they cannot have children, that is no impediment to marriage. That is just God giving them another opportunity to serve in another way, perhaps adopting, perhaps being active in other things. That is not an issue. If a couple gets married and they decide to contracept and never intend to have children, then they've not consecrated their marriage. It doesn't happen. We are called to be completely open and giving to the other. Now, the Catholic Church has a really good way, which I wish I knew more of when we got married in the 70s, called natural family planning. NFP is a way for couples to become pregnant, and also for ways to keep from being pregnant, because it identifies certain times of fertility that need to be avoided. And what does that do, though? What do people do? There's a great little video from Oklahoma on that. It's on the website. Actually, that's the website. Couples find other ways to express love to each other. And at the end of this one video, one couple says, "Well, tonight we play Yahtzee." But guys, this is the thing, though. Our wives know how to express love in many, many different ways, and how just being together can be a way of expressing love without being together. Children present. Anyway, but us guys, we kind of got to learn this because we think there's like one way, and maybe 1.5 ways. But anyway, so what NFP does is it allows a couple to communicate with each other. And what's interesting about that is NFP couples are about 3 to 4% divorce rate, and we have a class here once a month where you can learn more about it. And the lady who runs it, Ann Hall, is dedicated to teaching NFP couples. And again, it's a great tool for communication, for knowing each other. And I've had brides to be come to me and say, "Look, I'm so glad we went there because there's things I wanted my husband to know, but he just didn't want to talk about." And so us guys, we start to understand our wives a little more. And honestly, in a society that disrespects women, we learn how to respect and love our wives in a deeper way. And that's one of the reasons why NFP couples are experiencing about 3% divorce rate. So there's that going on. And in fact, I had a couple where he was the Catholic party, she was non-Catholic. You've already heard this. Sorry. Anyway, they went to the NFP class, and he actually opened up his own chiropractic practice. I don't know where it is. And she thought NFP was such a great thing for women's health that she became a trainer, and now as part of his practice, she does the holistic side of women's health. She teaches NFP from a purely non-religious standpoint, just from health. So, did that answer most of them?
Yeah.
Sort of. There's a lot. That's a packed one. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about holy orders and religious life, vocation, and women? I mean, we've talked a bunch about
guys.
Yeah, holy orders and guys.
Good job. Now, women have got. I mean, there is a increase in vocations to the religious life, and it's funny. After Vatican II, it was hard to, many nuns shed their habits. They no longer taught in schools. The communities began to collapse. And I think that was because many lost their identity, in my opinion. But many women are called to religious life and to community. And you'll see like certain communities growing like crazy. Dominicans are going off the charts. I had a friend whose daughter was like knocking out of the park on a computer basis, and she wound up going into the convent, and she's teaching in East LA. That was her call. So now, again, women are receiving a call just like guys do, and in the Catholic Church, that is to the religious life. And there's ways to to go into that, to try to discern if that truly is a calling. But we are seeing the communities which maintain their identity, which may maintain a dress instead of just dressing in regular daily wear, or instead of living in apartments, just somewhere where they have their own community and where they do identify by their dress, seem to be growing. Are you finding that? Bernadette, have you heard any of that?
I have not seen that, but I know of a